And look who's back, this guy. Every now and then you'll see my ugly mug pop up in one of these episodes. I'll join as I'm able, and I'm able today, and I'm pretty happy. I'm happy to be here, catch up with my buddy Rupesh, the foremost nobody. I, of course, am the lesser nobody, Kyle. And sort of like the last episode with the both of us, we don't really have anything planned today. We're just going to treat this as a bit of an excuse to chat and catch up and see what's going on in each other's lives, and just bring you along for that roller coaster ride of emotions. So just bear with us. But first, most importantly, let's bring in the foremost nobody, Rupesh. Buddy, how you doing?
I'm doing good. You talk about emotions. I'm feeling a little spicy right now. So I'm in the middle of a 36-hour water fast.
I don't even know, don't you die after 2 days with no water? Or something?
Shit. Is that right?
I don't know. You should look this up. Isn't that a...
I think they say after 4 or 5 days you need to be sort of medically supervised if you're going to do these water fasts, because there are clinics out there that do medically supervised water fasts.
Okay.
And I think the premise behind that is, detoxing and all kinds of other stuff that I'm never going to get into on that level.
Okay.
But I've been intermittent fasting for, I want to say, a year and a half. Been doing.
So you haven't had water in a long time?
I've had water. I haven't had beer, and I haven't had calories in a little while. So
sorry.
No, that's okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
so why are you doing a 36-hour water fast? I've never even heard of it. I didn't know that was even a thing.
Well, so yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are doing 3-day water fast. I've been doing this intermittent fasting for the 16-8 protocol. Does that make any sense to you? I don't know.
It does. I sort of hate when people call intermittent fasting because I heard somebody once call it just skipping breakfast, and that's basically what it is. And I get that everybody who does intermittent fasting doesn't choose that 8-hour window that would include lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
So basically, you just skip breakfast, and then you have an 8-hour window where you eat whatever you want.
Right. Yeah.
But then you don't eat anything outside that 8-hour window, and so most people just don't eat breakfast, right? Is
that's pretty much it. I mean, you're fasting obviously during the nighttime, which is why breakfast is breaking the fast. But I would say, I used to eat breakfast 7:30 before I'd hop on the bus and go to work, right? And then I slowly started pushing it and got to about 9, 10:30, and now I can go to 11:30, 12 o'clock, and it's been interesting because I always felt so dependent on breakfast, and I love breakfast. As you know, waffles, right? That's my thing. I love breakfast. But there was something a part of me that was just I felt like a slave to it. It's I had to have that 7:30 morning breakfast in order to function at work or whatever I was going to do for the rest of the day.
Do you feel that way with lunch though? So now, are you a slave to
by
lunch?
the time I get to lunch, I definitely feel like I need to eat something. But I just the rush of the morning, I just don't feel like I'm always enjoying breakfast. I just feel like I'm having to scarf that down. It's not mindful eating the way I'd want to eat. And so I just felt like I was kind of a little bit of a slave to it as much as I enjoy it. So it's been nice with the 16-8 to feel okay, I don't really need to have it. But by the time lunchtime comes around, I'm really hungry. So I was, seen and read a lot of people about doing these 3-day water fasts. And some people have been doing it for some time, and they say they've been talking about benefits of mental clarity and just self-discipline and, changes to body composition and blah, 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 blah. Now, I mean, if I gain a 5th or 6th ab in this process, that'd be great, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. But what I'm hoping for is at least I just want to experience sort of how I go through the day, whether I can have self-control. And I just find that if you have this self-control, how empowering is that? So, so I'm in 24 hours now officially.
So 12 hours left. So you
12
just
hours left.
Have a good sleep tonight, wait have an hour in the morning, and then just
I'm a bit anxious
slam
though.
A bunch of water.
I'm a bit anxious because it's the whole notion of like going to bed on an empty stomach. Like I've never not. I mean, not that I ever remembered. I've never gone a day without eating. Right? Like I've always.
Well, so is this just water? Like you ate lunch and supper today, or you haven't had anything?
No, haven't had anything. Not a single calorie. Nothing.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So just water, and then I've been actually really, really careful about like. So Michelle was like, "Oh, I think you could take this powder, right?" And so it was like had a bunch of electrolytes because you can't just drink water. You have to make sure you have those important minerals like sodium and magnesium and all that kind of stuff. So I knew I was always going to use a little bit of like Himalayan salt because Himalayan salt has traces of good minerals as well. So I knew I was going to put some of that in my water and drink that every so often just for electrolytes. But Michelle had this electrolyte powder, so I was going to try it. And so we were reading the ingredients, and it had something like beetroot in it. And I was like, oh no, I don't know if that has like a little bit of a calorie. And I honestly just wanted to do this completely like no calories. And so we looked online, and it said that it was a low calorie electrolyte powder. I was like, F it, not doing it. Can't do it. So even like I'm going to be taking like a magnesium supplement tonight, and it comes in the capsule, and Michelle's like, oh, she's like, the capsule could be made of like some sort of like corn or whatever.
Are you gonna break?
I was like, I hate you right now. So she's like, you could just dump it in the water and have it that way. Like take out the powder or the capsule and then do it that way. So I've been clean so far. No calories. It's the first time I've ever done this in my life, as far as I know. So otherwise, it'd probably be child abuse if that happened early on. So,
so what are you doing when your family's eating lunch and supper?
Man, so we went to Costco today.
Oh, that's a mistake.
Of course,
free
did.
samples.
Yeah.
Come on.
But that was part of like the whole test for me. I was like, okay, just go to Costco, and I found that the fruits and vegetables didn't have a problem. As soon as it got to like the processed foods, and even though I don't eat that stuff, and all like I was having a hard time.
Of course, the salty fats. Like,
yeah, and just wanting to eat like instant food, Yeah. So that was kind of tough. But then supper time, Michelle made steak and potatoes, and just smelled amazing.
Yeah,
and Ravina's just like, Daddy, it's supper time. You gonna eat? And she's like, why wouldn't you not eat? Like, of course she doesn't understand, and I don't know if I really understand at this point.
I was just gonna say, I'm with her. I don't get it.
yeah. So, anyways.
No, good for you, man.
12 hours. I'm gonna try see what happens. See how I feel, but I'm getting to a state now where I'm feeling a little bit of like lightness and clarity. Like there's sometimes where I get a little bit of anxiety that creeps in, but I feel like I'm past that point. 16 hours, like when I normally would eat, 16 to 20 hours was incredibly tough. And then leading into dinner was really, really tough as well. But after dinner, I'm feeling like, okay, you're at like the tail end of this thing, get through this podcast, and then you just have to go to bed, and, so we'll see what happens. But
yeah, we should have rebooked and recorded when you like ate your first morsel of food. Maybe you're just
I wanted to do this. I thought it'd be interesting. It's another good test, right? Just to see how I function through this podcast.
Testing yourself, man. And self-control, it's an incredible ability to have. Like, it's an incredible skill to have, to be able to really, really strong self-control. I mean, that sort of leads to everything, right? I mean, and I feel like, we'll talk about mindfulness sometimes and all that stuff. And I think all of that is sort of linked as to where you're really, really in touch with your brain, really in touch with your emotions, really in touch with how your body reacts to things, and really in touch with your actions in like when you're reacting to certain things. And to be able to have the form of self-control where I don't know, man. I don't know that I could do that. I don't know that I don't think I've ever, even like, in high school they'd have what was the charity 40-hour famine or whatever it's called, where you'd stay at the school overnight and like nobody could eat anything, and you'd do it together. Yeah. And I never even did that. Like, I don't know the longest I've fasted, probably before like a blood test or something. You have to fast for 12 hours or whatever, but I would just do it in the morning. But I don't know, interesting experiment, and it's funny that it's an experiment. Like this is you sort of seeing how you react to it and seeing if you can do it, and I don't know, testing yourself, which is incredibly noble, I think, but also that's tough, man. Like, you're hard on yourself.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I wouldn't recommend it for like if you haven't been, first of all, I think you have to be mentally prepared. Everyone who says they've like who have watched online who've gotten through it and who have not gone through it, the ones who haven't gone through it, they haven't prepared themselves mentally. They're just like, oh, I'm decided to do this. I've been thinking about this particular weekend for a month and a half, right? So I knew it was going to be this weekend. I've been doing the intermittent fasting. So I think I've set myself up really well. I think that I woke up though, which was interesting. I woke up for the first time with anxiety because I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to eat for the rest of the day. Last night I was like, fine. I was like, okay, I can get 16 hours, do that all the time. And so I went to bed, no problem. But then it was the morning time and I was like, oh shoot, I'm not going to eat for the rest of the day. And that was really starting to get me all worked up. And I felt like I was using energy unnecessarily. And so that was kind of interesting.
Yeah,
but I will say I've been vlogging it though. Like I just kind of took some videos of myself, just kind of talking through it, because this is the first time I'm doing it. So yeah. Anyway.
So is there a project that's going to come out of this, like a little video documentary of the process and all that stuff?
I don't know how interesting this is going to be if I actually put it online.
It'll be interesting for people that are considering doing a 36-hour no water fast.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about that, but
anyway.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's kind of going on with me.
What are the impacts to like your kidneys for not having water for 36 hours?
Well, I'm having water.
Oh shit! Oh, I thought you said no water. I thought this whole time you were like, I'm on 36-hour no water fast.
No, that's
stupid. Why. Oh man, people are gonna think I'm so dumb because I was like, wait, you're eating food or you're not eating food? I thought that you were saying that you were off of water.
No,
you were absolutely nothing. Okay, so you are drinking water.
I am drinking water.
Oh,
remember I said that I was going to have electrolyte powder and everything like that?
Yeah, well, I was going to question you on that. I didn't want to. Anyways, I didn't want to like harsh your buzz.
No.
All right, so it's just
strictly
fast.
Water, no calories, just strictly water.
Got it. Yeah. Okay, now I understand what you're getting at. Okay, sorry.
And I'll have trace minerals, like I'll have sodium and magnesium and all that kind of stuff. But there's no calories associated. It's just the minerals because I'm just putting Himalayan salt. So,
and you can drink as much water as you want.
Yeah, I mean, just drink it normally, right? You're not changing anything about that. I mean, it's a little warmer. So you might have
I remember I read this book once where there was a very poor family, but they had access to water, whatever it is, and so her dad would say, drink a bunch of water and then have a bit of food so you feel fuller. So I'm just you could, if you're feeling really hungry, and it probably wouldn't help because there's obviously no calories in it, but if you just drink like, I don't know, 2.5 liters of water just to feel full for a minute.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that's the way it works, right? Your stomach, when it expands, it essentially the sensory feedback to your brain tells you you're full, right? So but yeah, it doesn't last very long though, right?
No way, because there's no nutritional value other than water, pretty important, but all right. Well, I feel like a real idiot in the first.
No, I can see how it can get kind of confusing. A water fast, I guess you could interpret it the other way around. So
yeah, and I mean, I'm an idiot. I don't know. We haven't been sleeping super good. It's too damn hot. I don't know. That's embarrassing. People are going to be like, these guys are idiots. I'm never watching another episode again. Okay, so you're fasting for 36 hours. Got it. Yeah. No calories, but you can have water.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then I'm thinking I'm gonna break the fast with
waffles.
No, actually, I'm gonna have a cup of bone broth.
Oh.
So Michelle's been doing some research in that. This shouldn't be new, but bone broth is very, very healing to your gut, right? But there's some. I'm not sure what the research looks like, but she's been telling me that there's some research to show that to break the fast, bone broth is really a great thing to use. So I'm gonna do that. And then I'm going to bring in the waffles. But,
As a clean
you
up
know
hitter.
me with my waffles.
I understand.
Yeah.
I don't understand bone broth. Because when I make broth, I just boil basically a bunch of bones. Like I'll just put a chicken in a pot of water and I'll boil it for hours.
Yeah.
So what's bone broth? Like why do people call it bone broth versus just broth?
Well, I think because you can have broth with like just vegetables, right? Like you could have... It doesn't have to be like in some people maybe they make the broth without the bones. I'm not sure, but I mean you can get broth in all kinds of other ways, right?
Yeah, totally. But anyways, I just figured like if you're making a broth with like a meat or something, generally it's going to have a bone in it because that's where most of the flavor comes from. So, anyway, so I just never really understood the process, like the difference between bone broth and like beef broth or chicken stock or whatever it is. But
we just made a whole ton of bone broth because we got these stewing hens. Do you know what stewing hens are? Well, I mean, sorry, they're not called stewing hens. These are the hens, the egg layer hens. Okay. So you can buy them, and then the meat's obviously tough, but they're great for making broth. And so we just put like 3 of them in a big, huge pot and made a ton of broth. And
oh, nice.
Yeah.
I heard that's the secret to good chicken soup. Whenever I make chicken soup, usually we roast a chicken on a Friday, let's say. I'll get not all of it, like I'll get all the easily accessible meat off it, keep all the bones together, and then I'll boil, like the next day I'll boil, the meat that remains and then all the bones for whatever, 3-4 hours, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it's still bland. But somebody's telling me that no, you need to get the birds, put the whole bird in the water, boil it forever, and then strain it. And that's how you get the really, really rich broth. Because I'd find I'd be adding so much salt to my chicken soup because it never really had that strong sort of chicken soup flavor that you want, which is generally pretty salty. Or like there's a real nice like umami, flavor there that I was never getting. It was always bland. So I'll have to try.
That's 100%. We've definitely experienced that, Kyle. Like whenever we use the carcass or the remains from roasted chicken, it's not nearly as the same as when you do it from a fresh bird. So
so now you just got a freezer full of bone broth.
Yeah, but we go through it like crazy. Like we'll have a cup every day pretty much, and that's like the first thing that enters our stomach, and we're feeling really good about it. But it's crazy because I think we calculated today we have probably 2 weeks worth from 3 birds. But Michelle one time, because we ran out of broke broth, she decided to buy it from the store, and like really clean stuff. And a small package was like $15, and it lasted 1 day. So it just goes to show like how expensive that stuff is, and I think we're saving a ton of money from this. So
yeah, no doubt. But so you guys aren't you're not using the stock in soup, like you're just drinking it.
Yeah, we're doing that right now. I mean, we have used the stock and soup in the past, but I think right now we're just focusing on drinking it. So
nice, man. That'll taste so good tomorrow.
And then we
shouldn't even talk about it.
No, it's all good. I've gone through Costco and supper. Like this is not gonna. I don't think this is gonna phase you at this point. But what I was gonna say is that we also scoop out the fat.
Yeah.
And then we use the fat for like cooking chicken and stuff.
Oh,
so
okay,
it's like try to complete the cycle. So.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah,
and you guys, your culinary world is on just a completely different planet than mine. Like, you guys are so thoughtful, so deliberate, so like planned. It's impressive. It's honestly impressive. Like how you guys sort of treat food and your relationship with food. And I don't know. I always enjoy hearing you talk about it because it's, I don't know. It's just so well thought out. I feel like.
I was never like this, like growing up. I remember just kind of scarfing down food and not really caring about anything. But it's interesting to kind of, I mean, I don't know if with Avina, we try to have her be a mindful eater and really take time. And we have her say our gratefuls and stuff like that. But I'm hoping the practices will rub off on her and she'll be that way because I was never that way. But it's such a great feeling to just focus on what you're eating, right? And just be sort of really with your food and enjoying it in that way. I find that whenever I scarf things down, I never digest it properly. No.
So how long do you think it takes you to eat an average supper?
It takes me, I'm usually one of the last people to finish, for sure. Yeah. I've always been kind of a slow eater, but then with being more conscious about it, definitely, takes me time. But it's just so much more enjoyable.
No doubt. Like I'm sure, because the thing is, I'm the asshole that's done first most times. Because I love, I don't know, I just, I love it and I get so excited and I just like want the flavors or something all at once. And so I just like, I'm the jerk who's eating too fast at the table, I think most of the time. So I could be more mindful with my approach to food, I think.
Have you ever tried to just slow it down? Like one tip that we use is we always try to just put our fork down between every bite.
That's the one thing I've done yet. Not consistently, and I don't know that I would I don't think I did it today when I had supper, but that's the one thing that when I am trying to slow down and be a little more, that's exactly what I'll do. I'll put my utensils down and then put my hands on my lap as I'm eating, and then put it in. And it works. It certainly works. But I find sometimes, and I don't know if you're like this, but when I'm hungry, I'm not super, and maybe this is, part of this fast, but when I'm hungry, it impacts my ability to do a lot of things. It's like when I'm short on sleep, like it really impacts my ability to, be patient and, to be reasonable and all these things. And so if I'm really hungry and I sit down to eat, it's like this visceral thing where I just need to get as much of the food in me to sort of suppress that, whoever that person is, like that, that like nobody wants to be around. Because I'm not great to be around when I'm hungry, but I feel like you could train that out of yourself. Like you could, it's almost like you're doing, right? Like practice a bit more of a deliberate approach to food and understand and gain more self-control and sort of get a better understanding of how food affects you and how you are when you're hungry, and take steps to, I don't know, maybe make yourself be a bit better of a person when you're hungry and enjoy food a little bit more. I feel like you probably did that years ago, though. This is...
No, man. I tell you today, it was hard to play with Avina. It was so tough. Like, she wanted to, because she just thinks it's a weekend, right? And weekend is like, man, prime daddy time, right? Because, it doesn't get that during the weekdays as much. And so she just wants to do all her role playing and all the same things that we do. And there were times where I just had to sit down. I just told her, it was like, I try not to show it to her. I just kind of gradually would bring it to the couch, or I was like, let's go outside and sit in the hammock, and I just tell her like 30 stories, because I just couldn't, like, physically I was feeling like kind of exhausted and definitely low energy. And also just, I was finding that I was a little bit snappier towards her. And so I was just really, the great thing about it though, is that, like, catching yourself, right? And it's like, okay, I feel a little bit more snappier right now. What do I need to do to is there anything I could do to counteract that? Maybe have a glass of water right now, so all that is kind of cool, because it's like, okay, if I can get through this, then because these are like survival urges, right? So it's like, if you can get through these things, then I almost feel like it kind of makes everything else easier. Now I can't imagine that this one instance of 36 hours, I'm going to have long-term memory from this to remember, okay, how I got through these survival instincts. But, I might try it again at some point, just to kind of every so often have that practice. But
you think you'd revisit it? Hey, just say,
I think so.
Like, almost see how you improved on it. It's like, first time, okay, I was, this is how it went, and here's where I maybe didn't do so good. Second time, okay, here's the things I'm going to work on. I sort of know what I'm getting myself into now.
Yeah, I think I'd be curious to be like, okay, now I know what to expect, but because it's survival instincts and these feelings, like, will the fact that I know what I'm going to expect counteract that in any way? I'm actually very curious about that. So that's the thing. That's the reason I probably would want to do that again.
Interesting. Yeah. Man, so that's probably pretty consuming right now. Like, I was going to say, well, what the rest of your week? How's the rest of your week? What else is going on? But I wonder if you can even think about
capacity for thinking about. No, not at all. I've been thinking about this fast for like probably since Tuesday of this week. I'm like, okay, it's coming. And I made sure I had a good meal on Friday. And
what was the last meal?
It was quesadillas, chicken quesadillas. It was so good.
Love quesadillas, and
so
me, I love that Tex-Mex.
Yeah,
baby, love it.
It was good. And then we actually, something that's super easy, Kyle, which we'll have to, when you come over the next time, we'll have to do for you. But do you have I don't know if you have a good blender. We have a Vitamix. And so what we do is we put just frozen fruit, a little bit of ice, some like a little bit of coconut cream, and just crush it in the blender. Man, it's so delicious. It's kind of like ice cream, but there's we don't add any sugar to it.
Is coconut cream, you just mean like the hard part of coconut milk? What's coconut cream?
Yeah, so when the can or whatever, we put it in the fridge and then it creams up, right? Okay. And I think we talked about this a little bit, but
we talked about the whipped cream that you can make with like the dense part of coconut milk.
Right. Yeah, so taking that dense part and then adding like a couple of tablespoons to that, so you get a little bit of the fattiness in there. mixed with like the natural flavors of frozen fruit, crushing that together. Oh, so good.
It's money, hey?
Yeah. So anyways, I had that Friday night too. So
All right, so quesadillas and like a little coconut fruit ice cream milkshake thing.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk about food anymore, man. That's sorry to make you bring it up.
No, don't be sorry. This is what I purposely have done this, so it was my choice. It's all good. But you know what I have been thinking about, which I feel like we should have a little bit of a conversation about, which is the whole non-GMO organic thing.
Yeah, okay. I haven't been thinking about it much at all, but let's we can chat about it. What's going on?
Okay. Well, so because I think you said that if something is organic, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's non-GMO, correct?
That was my understanding. Yeah, something can be organic and non-GMO, but still be genetically modified.
Okay. So if something is certified organic, that means that it can't have GMO ingredients in it. And the other pieces is that it can't have pesticides, herbicides, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
If something is non-GMO, then it has it can still have pesticides and herbicides and all that kind of stuff. So that's really like sort of the difference between the two. So if you're like USDA organic, or I'm sure the Canadian certification as well would do this as well, would have the same kind of standards, but you're covered in terms of it being non-GMO.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I always thought that you could have some, because in my mind, and this is probably due to my sort of shallow understanding of both categorizations or both labels, I suppose. Organic was just like no pesticides used in the growing of the food, and then non-GMO was they hadn't altered the DNA of whatever it is that you're eating. But the two things could be separate. So I didn't understand. I didn't realize that organic could incorporate a GMO.
So it's like the higher standard essentially.
Interesting. Okay, good to know. I'm still fine with GMOs though, and I also think that it's and obviously not all of them, and like Monsanto, and like there's a bunch of dicks that do a bunch of shitty thing, and there's no doubt that's like that stuff should stop. But I think that people altering the DNA of a food in the lab versus people intentionally breeding different kinds of, like, people have been selectively breeding foods for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Mm-hmm. That's why certain things like carrots look the way they do, as opposed to what they actually would look like in nature. And to me, that's sort of a similar form of evolution. It's just speeding up evolution. Or, I mean, evolution is not the word, but we've been selectively breeding the food that we eat, and the food that you eat has been selectively bred for generations. Mm. And now we have technology to kind of go in and alter the DNA a little bit. But to me, the two practices aren't that different. But and again, there are some examples of some really bad companies doing some really shitty things. You're not
talking about like Roundup Ready corn and all that.
Totally, kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff out there that's not great because of the genetic altering. But I think that the benefits of having the skill set to alter something's DNA to sort of cater something like rice that can grow in either flooded crops or rice that can grow in either drought-stricken areas of the world, it saved billions of lives, like over the course of our lifetimes. And so I if you had to take it or leave it, I would take it, I suppose is what I'm saying.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a hotly debated topic. I just think, why not label the whole thing?
What do you mean?
Right? Like, so the people who advocate against GMO foods, they'll say, just label it to say that this is a GMO food and this is a non-GMO food, and let consumers make the choice. Sure. Right? Yeah. They make it so much harder to buy and purchase organic food, and so much easier to buy GMO foods, right? And let people make that decision. I was really impressed by one of the grocery stores that we have here in Edmonton, and they started putting, this was a long time ago, I think it's probably changed now, but around their eggs they were putting cage and what that means, and free run and free range, and kind of showing all the different options and just labeling everything. And so it really...
And eggs is one of the most confusing things. Like, there's so many different ways to say something that sounds good but is not good.
Totally. Yeah. And so at least providing some of that awareness about what that is, I would assume that some customers, did a double take or a double read of okay, what it means to actually be caged, or what free run means as opposed to free range, and why you would pay that extra money. But just let consumers decide, right? If we talk about a free market system, the same people who advocate for not having the labels are probably the same people who have benefited and advocate for a free market capitalist society. Well, let's do that then, right?
Yeah, I have no problem.
That's my big thing with that.
Yeah, no,
right?
and I have no problem with that, with proper labeling that actually allows consumers to make a smart decision, because it's really hard. I have a buddy who runs a company, and he produces this product that's 100% made in Canada. Every single piece of this product is made in Canada. It's assembled in a small town in Alberta. I don't know. But there's a lot of competition in this industry, and there's a lot of companies who don't make their things in Canada, who make them overseas, which whatever. That is what it is. The problem is the companies that don't make their products in Canada can make their labels look like they make their products in Canada. And so he has a distinct competitive advantage because he is 100% making his things in Canada. He's doing it responsibly, and he can prove all that stuff. And so on his label, it says made in Canada. But other companies can say assembled in Canada. They can make their entire product overseas, ship the last two pieces, have a machine put it together here, and they can say assembled in Canada. And they can have just as big of a maple leaf on their product as he can. And there's 1,000 different ways to make it sound like something is made in Canada when it's not made in Canada.
Totally.
And so he's been really rallying governments to have stronger restrictions around labeling practices, because people want to support smart consumers, but people can be lazy and not do all the research that they need into a product. Sure, that's one point, but people are busy. I go to the grocery store once a week. Actually, my wife has been doing most of the shopping lately, but we go to the grocery store once a week and we buy hundreds of things, and I can't research all these things. And so stores like the one that you've mentioned that make it much easier for the consumer to make a informed decision, and labeling practices in general and the legislation around labeling practices 100% needs to be clarified, needs to be made sort of as simple as possible so people can actually make a conscious consumer decision on what they're doing. It's really, really murky right now. So anyways, I agree 100% that there should be some facilitation for consumers to know exactly what they're buying and to be able to incorporate those factors into their purchase decisions 100%.
There's this one of these products makes me really laugh. It's called I think it's called Europe's Best. I don't know if it still exists. I remember 9-10 years ago seeing it on the shelf, and it's frozen, might be frozen vegetables or frozen fruit. Anyways, it on the front of the packaging has a beautiful farm and just looks like Western Europe, and just really. You turn the back, it says product of China. Yeah. Right? But the company is called Europe's Best. Yeah, right?
Totally. And there's companies who will name their company. What's the example here? There are some specific examples that I used to know that are kind of have slipped my mind. But for example, there could be a farm in China called Made in Alberta. Made in Alberta Farms. And so it's all over their product, Made in Alberta Farms. But it's not made in Alberta. It's made wherever it's made, not Alberta. But because the company's name is Made in Alberta, it's all over it. So you think, okay, well, this is made in Alberta because it says right on it. And then that's not the exact example, but things like that happen all the time. It's absolutely infuriating.
Wasn't McDonald's 100% beef? Wasn't that a thing too, where the 100% beef was actually the name of a company or something like that? And then people found out that actually it wasn't truly 100% beef, and it had all this kind of filler and.
Yeah, no, that would surprise me. So just stuff like that, right? I think that having smart consumers, I don't know that there's a downside to having informed consumers and to have them, be able to sort of put their money where they feel the best. And the thing is, there's still going to be people that are buying those things, that maybe don't align with other people who have the ability to maybe pay a bit more for certain products. But there's always going to be that market, no doubt. But I think absolutely people should be able to know what they're buying before they buy it. And some of it certainly is if you look hard enough, a lot of the stuff you can find the answers, and there are people who do take that effort. And so some of it's laziness, some of it is sort of legislation around. I think labeling practices But it's a tricky thing.
Well, yeah, and I also understand that with it's hard to put everything on a label or a package. Like there's so much space that you have to compete with. Like in as they design these things, I think the nutrition facts labeling, like you can only get so much, otherwise it'll take up space from the rest of the product, and that was like a legislated thing. So there's lots of things that governments and companies sort of have to consider. But man, to me, this contributes to the mistrust that people have in a capitalist society, right? Because there are a ton of benefits to a capitalist free market society, but these are the things that really irk people and make people feel like, okay, government has to have a heavier hand on things, and want people to, we're seeing this, more and more sort of autocratic societies are developing across the world. It's not because of labeling of GMO and non-GMO foods, but the premise, I think, exists to a lot of things, which is like, free market capitalism is sometimes screwing over the small guy because, they're not really representing their information in truthful ways, or like you said, with your friend and, oh, we're actually having jobs in Canada. We produce these things, but this company in China can mislabel something and say it's still kind of assembled in Canada or whatever. Like, people get pissed off at these things, right?
Yeah, and if you leave it to, like, I think with paper products, there was I think it's FSC, the Forestry Stewardship Council. I think there was an effort to kind of label these products in a sustainable fashion. So if it had this FSC label on it, you knew that they weren't harvesting timber in like riparian areas, and they weren't harvesting timber in habitat of endangered species and whatever, right? And so they had this label across these paper products that says, "Yep, we're FSC certified. We're good to go." And people and consumer behavior started to lean towards this reliable criteria that was stamped on all these products, right? Well, of course, what happened was now that there's another criteria that's come out. I think it's called the SFI, maybe the Sustainable Forest Initiative or something. That looks the same. It looks very similar, has a lot of similar words as the other label, but it's nowhere near as thorough and robust and all this stuff. And I might have those mixed up, but so that's anytime that there's a dollar to be made by looking like you're doing something, people are going to find a way to sort of mimic what you're doing to kind of make that money without having to go through all the rigor of whatever these sustainable practices that you're practicing. So there has to be some form of regulation around it, and governments are probably in the best space to do that. But it's a tricky area to kind of play in. But anyways, so going back to GMO foods, I agree with your point that people should be able to know when something's GMO'd when it's not.
Did you see Seaspiracy, that documentary about? It's on Netflix. It's worth watching. I mean, it's like some documentaries that can be kind of sensationalist, and maybe there's some things that are misused, but there's some things that I had no idea about, which just pisses you off, right? So, for example, tuna, right? There's a big issue of in order to catch tuna, you gotta tuna need fish to eat, but the other competitors for some of these fish are dolphins. And so they show footage of fishermen in Japan actually, purposely slaughtering the dolphins so they don't eat the fish so that the tuna can eat it. So now there's like a certification that talks about dolphin-free tuna, right? Well, the guy goes and digs into this more, and he finds that the dolphin-free tuna, the people who are certifying, they say, well, no, we can't 100% trace this. There's no way we can do that. And so what's your label about? Well, they can't stand behind their label. But they have this everywhere, which is like dolphin-free tuna, dolphin-free tuna. It's just, I talked to Tiz, co-founder of Zazie Bean, about like the fair trade stuff, right? Because that was about fair trade chocolate, because I'd seen another documentary talking about how these certifications are all bogus and they're all phony, and you can't trust fair trade certifications. And we had a conversation about this, and she said that there are some certifications that aren't as rigorous. And so she talked about hers, and she said you can 100% trace the beans back to the farm. Because issues with some fair trade certifications is like they may only want like 50% of the beans to be traced or whatever. But some certifications are much more rigorous. But the thing is that like unless I talked to the co-owner of a chocolate company to really understand that. Not everyone has access to that kind of stuff, right? And so how do you know? So I completely agree with you. Like maybe there's a role for government to play in terms of saying these are the different kind of certifications. Here's how they rank up. Because how are people going to know, right? Like it's just, and companies will say, well, we labeled it, and people have to do their due diligence to find out. But
then you're just back to where you started, right? Like, and with tuna, it's insane because that's like eggs, where every single can of tuna has a different sort of thing to make you feel good about the tuna you're buying. And my wife looked into it, and I can't, like, sort of what you could maybe rely on the most as far as certifications for tuna. And I think it was tuna that's caught with line and pole fishing because they aren't using nets. And so the nets are where all these animals get caught and slaughtered and all this stuff.
Yeah. And just the waste from the nets too. Right?
Totally, yeah. But so there's certain kinds of tuna that the label's more trustworthy than others. But it's the same thing as what we were talking about before with the sustainable forestry practices, with coffee, with chocolate, with all this stuff. I mean, for every one certification stamp that these companies can get, there's 100 that aren't nearly as sustainable, likely, or as beneficial to the countries where these products are coming from, or to the practices that are used to kind of harvest these resources. I don't know. It's a slippery slope, and so you're sort of back to like Europe's best versus made in Alberta or whatever, because it's the same. Like you can trust Europe's best company as much as you can trust half these labels, probably more than half these labels, and so it sort of puts you in the same conundrum. And now you're looking at the labeled company and sort of these criterias or these certification stamps that are on them. You're like, well, okay, like what do I do here? And for people, people have busy lives, and that's sort of a cop out, but it also isn't. I mean, you need to be able to. Well,
if you're buying 100 products every week,
how are you going to know, right?
There's no way.
So that's nice when certain stores will go out of their way to kind of help you with those decisions, but not every store is going to do that. Most people aren't shopping at these stores anyways, because generally places like that are probably more expensive, selling organic food or whatever it is. So it's a tricky conversation. I don't have the answer, but I think it's institutions like governments have the legislative ability and the long-standing nature. Like the government of Alberta probably isn't going anywhere in the next 100 years. It might, but I mean, we're probably not going to lose our democracy anyways. And so there's going to be some form of government that can rule over these things. So our acts and regulations are likely going to persist, beyond our lives anyways. So that position of regulatory power and the legislative tools to sort of enact those policies, I think, puts governments in a pretty good way to in a pretty good position to sort of enforce these things. But I don't know. I haven't done a ton of research into it, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, but that seems to me to be.
I mean, the other problem though is unless governments have the experts working inside to be able to, let's just say, chocolate. Okay, so you have all these fair trade certifications. Government's like, okay, here's the best and most stringent. They have to have people who are on the inside to be able to tell them what to do. And I was reading, so this Obama book has taken me forever.
You've been talking about this Obama book for like 5 months.
It's just I don't get time to always read this thing, but I'm in the last like 30, 40 pages. But one thing that he did talk about was the 2008 financial crisis, and I was really curious to hear him talk about that. And he essentially said, because the flank he gets from the left is that how come no one lost their job? How come no one went to jail like all those executives? And totally, I feel that way. And we didn't completely transform Wall Street. He had the opportunity to, or his presidency did, and nothing happened. And he talks about that he couldn't necessarily do that because the consequences would have been so severe for the United States' economy. And he's thinking about all these, the people who, to no fault of their own, are suffering from this, and it's just going to make it even worse. Just for transformation. But the other piece is that government didn't necessarily have the expertise to be able to lead and control that transformation. And if he got rid of those people who were responsible for the crime in the first place, there'd be nobody. There's no backup capacity to be able to actually do the kind of reforms that people wanted him to do.
I remember you.
And so that's like a bigger problem in general, is that industry sometimes has so much expertise and power that government doesn't have, and so you rely on all these third parties to provide advice and be able. And I mean, we know this working in government, but just generally, like, and so I just feel like even if government went out of their way to try to square up, okay, what's the best label or what's the best certification or whatever, that you have to have industry involved, and industry is just going to have so much knowledge and power on that topic that can you actually, do the reforms and do the transformation that's really necessary to achieve the objective that you want. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, I remember because you talked about that with Amanda Janu, and she talked about how Iceland did the exact opposite. They just let the big banks fail and didn't help anybody out. And I keep meaning to look into that. That's so interesting to me. I haven't done any research into that, but that's something that I keep meaning to look into. Is there are countries who, and this isn't really talking about certifications at all, but just kind of on a bit of a tangent with Amanda's point.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been meaning to kind of look into that and sort of see how that's, because when you talk to people, they're like, he couldn't. He just couldn't do it. Like, he couldn't put these people in jail. He couldn't. It's so complicated and all these things. And so to hear Amanda say, nobody knows how it works, and it's and there are countries that didn't let these big banks, didn't say that they were too big to fail, and they put people in jail and all this stuff. I keep meaning to kind of look into that. But yeah, you're right.
I think the problem though, and I don't know, but like he does, what I appreciate about it again is he went into sort of his detailed experience into it, but he's also relying on the advice of people who have worked there, right? And so they're saying that, and that's based on their understanding. Unless he has a first-hand account of like, this is exactly how it is, he could press on questioning and be like, are you sure really we can't do this? There's nobody there. And they're like, no, Mr. President, there's nobody there. If we get rid of these CEOs and these VPs or whatever, it's like everything just falls. I mean, what are you supposed to do in that case? You're dependent on your best advice. You're just not going to, I mean, you could be a complete renegade and completely go against, the expert advice. But I think Iceland's also a different story. I mean, you're talking about the U.S. financial system, which essentially has an impact around the globe. I mean, Iceland has a larger capability probably to reform itself. I mean, it's the same thing with the Canadian system. Like, yeah, we have some big banks. We are able to isolate ourselves from the 2008 financial crisis. But I don't know. I would assume, and not obviously being a financial banking expert, but you can't compare Iceland's system to the United States, right? If you let the United States banking system completely fail and go to shit, it's going to affect like the entire world, right?
Yeah, but I wonder if you're just delaying it. Like, I wonder if by not doing anything at the time when you have a chance, it's going to happen anyways, just years down the road maybe. I don't know.
Well, significant reforms did happen. It's just that it's just that, if you're somebody who, lost your complete retirement, lost your home, you want people in jail. You want people to die. You know what I mean? Like you want blood on the street kind of thing. Like, that's probably the feeling that you have. And to know that nothing happened in that regard is completely unacceptable. But it doesn't mean that financial reform didn't happen, right? Like, there was legislation that actually put in protections, and I don't know if some of that was kind of reversed under the Trump administration, but stuff did happen. It's just that it doesn't compare, right? It's not front page news compared to if those Wall Street executives were handcuffed and put in jail forever, right?
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it's not quite as flashy a headline. Anyways, I don't really know anything about finances. I don't really know anything about governments either, so I'm not so I don't know why I'm sort of pushing back on some of those points, because I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to the vast majority of that stuff. But
I think it's an interesting case, though. I mean, you bring up a good point.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to understand sort of what happened in Iceland and how they were able to do it, because, something needs to change for sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Good. So what else is going on? Fasting in the books? Well, almost in the books. One more sleep.
Yeah. Beyond that, I've been working with. It feels good to build something. Let's just put it that way. So I built 2 rain barrel stands, and that feels really, really good. I know we've talked about like masculinity and like it's a fluid definition and it's not like the traditional thing. But I will say to build something with my hands feels really, really
So
good.
satisfying.
So I'm kind of proud of myself. Yeah.
So satisfying. Good for you, buddy. Especially because, like, in the sort of work that a lot of people do behind desks, like you and I do behind desks, you put all this work and effort in, and half the time, whatever, like, the results and impacts aren't quite as tangible as something that you built with your bare hands that you can sit and look at and wrap your knuckles on and test how sturdy it is. And I've got into woodworking a bit over the last couple of years. Built a deck last year, and I've worked with it over my summer labor jobs and all that stuff in one way or another. But I've just sort of gotten back into it a little bit, and it's so satisfying. Like it's just I absolutely like understand that sentiment, and it's almost like the value of work and working with your hands, and I don't know, it's really, really satisfying. So I'm glad that
I find tradespeople brilliant. Like the people who can make things, find them so brilliant. Like when we got our basement renoed, our contractor just framed the entire basement in a day. Right? I mean, he's a carpenter by trade, and I was like, man, this is like you did this so quickly. He's like, oh, this is nothing, right? And obviously, like somebody who doesn't work with their hands sees that, and it's just brilliant. But what I find is just like the ability for whether it be a plumber or carpenter or whoever, to just see something and be like, yeah, okay, I can make, or like see a design and be like, yeah, I know how to make that, right? And just like, for me, I have to like follow everything like a recipe, and if I have to look at the numbers again, and I literally need somebody to tell me step by step because I can't think 3-4 steps ahead. Like it just does not click. And it's incredibly frustrating. So yeah, to be able to make something felt good.
Yeah, no doubt.
It's funny because I made the second rain barrel stand, and it was kind of supposed to be on a slope. And so Avina comes out and she's like, "Daddy, that doesn't look right.
Get out of here." Nobody asked you.
And so.
Ah, man, good for you. That's sweet. I just read this book called Shop Class as Soulcraft, and the subtitle is An Inquiry into the Value of Work, I think. And basically, it's this guy who he had a job with like a political think tank in Washington, and he's making a ton of money and all that stuff, but he just didn't like. He's a good writer, like the writing in the book's wonderful, and but he left it to set up like a mechanic shop for vintage motorcycles, and the whole book is sort of around sort of this value of working with your hands and what all the benefits of that are, and how people people say that the world's going to be automated soon enough, and so there's people that work with their hands are going to be obsolete or whatever. But he's just like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, because what machine can come into your house and diagnose a plumbing problem, or what machine can like come into your house and diagnose a problem with your if you have something wrong structurally with your house, like what machine can just come in and do it and then just fix it? Like that's like there are certain problems or certain jobs and certain things that we're always going to have in our homes that there are always going to be issues with. They'll very likely always be difficult for some machine to sort of quantify and understand and then figure out how to do and then actually fix it. And so he's like, people need to get away from this idea that you need to, sit behind a computer and, sort of work with your keyboard and all this stuff. Because yes, some of those jobs are valuable. Some of them are obsolete and not needed at all. But there are certain jobs in the trades that will never go away, ever. And that work is incredibly satisfying. So he just talks about sort of all the benefits of that. And it was really, really interesting take on it, and really interesting way to sort of look at how you're spending your time and how you make your money and what you can feel good about versus maybe what you don't feel so good about. And I don't know, man, even if you were a carpenter and you'd framed 1,000 houses, that 1,001st house, that you had put the walls up and everything was square, and so your lines are square and everything's plumb and it all just comes. I can't imagine it doesn't get less satisfying and you don't like walking away from something that you've done. You're like, I did that, and it looks really good, and it's going to stand the test of time, and it's great work. And I know it's great work, and I did it with my hands, and it feels really, really good. I can't imagine that goes away. Whereas, there are jobs, and he talks about it with this political think tank in Washington, where he's just like, I put all this work in, and late nights and stressful and all this stuff, and then, he said that there's one of the things that was difficult for him is when you get on an elevator with somebody or see somebody, they ask him like what he did. And he would try to explain. And he said every single time, 5-10 seconds in, their eyes would glaze over. He's like, because it's hard to conceive and it's hard to explain because sometimes we don't even know what we do. Like we can't even succinctly say what we do. But now he's like, I'm a motorcycle mechanic, and people they instantly understand it, and a lot of people have questions about it. Anyways, there's a lot of benefits, to working behind a keyboard, but he really creates this. He really argues for working with your hands and sort of this skill set that can only come from doing things, that can only come from knowledge, that can only come from doing something 1,000 times. And he has a lot of examples about the intricacies of working in motorcycles built in the 1670s and 80s. And I don't know, really satisfying book to read, and really, really interesting angle to put it from, and really made it sort of put words to how I feel when I build things or whatever. I mean, it's just so satisfying.
Does he talk about 3D printing at all in that book?
The book was written in 2009, I think. So I don't think it was a big part of it. No, 2009, 2010.
Okay.
He could touch on it briefly, but I don't remember him talking about it.
Yeah, because what he's saying, it's hard to argue that. The only thing I was thinking about is like as more homes become like 3D printed and machines kind of build these things, can it get to a place where in order for it to be fixed, maybe you don't need a human, maybe a machine can fix it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about 3D printed homes, to be honest. And all I know is that every house I've ever been in Edmonton is built with wood and was framed by somebody. And, it's all like, concrete foundation, wood framed in walls, insulation, for sure. Like drywall, and all that stuff. Like in our lifetimes and the next couple lifetimes, I don't know. I can't imagine the need for human labor going away anytime soon. 3D printed homes, though, you got to tell me more about that. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Oh yeah, no. In that's happening throughout the States. I just saw in parts of Africa.
What are they like 3D printing? Like, what is it?
I don't know what the actual material is. It must be obviously something that's durable and that can hold or whatever. But the entire walls and framing and everything, it's a massive machine that actually like pours in goop or whatever, and it's printed out or whatever. Awesome. Now I don't know what it does for like things like plumbing and all that. I'm assuming that has to still be that. Maybe that can't be 3D printed, but 3D printing is an absolutely disruptive technology, and it's probably gonna take away a lot of jobs, and a lot of those tradespeople are probably gonna lose jobs as a result of it. Now, the benefit on the consumer side is that if you can produce something that's just as durable and high quality, the costs are going to be so much lower. Right?
So I understand that. So like 3D printing will print these houses and stuff, but I imagine the houses will have electrical needs, will have plumbing needs, will have structural needs to be fixed and stuff. Like somebody's got to come and diagnose that stuff. And I guess, cars now, like you can plug a little thing in, it gives you a code, and you can look it up and tells you exactly what's wrong with it. Even when like you buy a used car, you can buy one of these little code things and like throw it in the car. It'll tell you what's wrong with it. Somebody still has to fix it though. So I would wonder if the 3D...
I'm sure there's still parts of it, like you can't avoid an electrician probably. I don't know. I'm assuming that would be the case. You would have to have somebody who does the inspection, but even automobiles, right? Like Tesla's come such a long way to making most, like, I don't know what, I want to say 60 to 70% of their vehicles are completely done by robots, right? And then they have humans, which they say that there are certain tasks in making a Tesla that a human has to do that a robot just can't do. And maybe it's because of the dexterity or whatever that a human has that a robot can't achieve. But still, even if like a home can be 70% built by a machine, you take away so much of the human labor and human skill that's required, right? So that's going to be disruptive to labor for sure.
No doubt. Yeah. Man, I should get myself a little 3D printer and I could print some cool things. I don't know what I'd print, but shoes. Maybe print some sick shoes.
You apparently print anything.
Insane.
Apparently, there's like you can print guns, which is super.
Yeah,
scary.
I remember seeing like some future like years ago, some like Law and Order show or something where they were like, that was the thing. Like this guy like 3D printed this gun, and was it the guy that 3D printed the gun who was guilty, or was it the guy that made the plans available to like 3D print the gun and guilty, or whatever it was? But yeah, no, it's so I guess in like, will you in the future? Will you like buy like a 3D printer? Well, not the future, probably now. You own a 3D printer and you just buy somebody for the plans. So like you just like pay somebody online who's designed this thing, and then they give you the plans that you can then flip over to your printer, and your printer just makes it.
My understanding, that's already a thing. Like there's a huge sort of free market kind of open source thing where people share their plans for all kinds of 3D printed objects, and yeah, that's already kind of happening, right? Like I think, yeah,
super cool. I'm so not technologically, like there's people out there just like, these guys are idiots. Like of course that's happening. Like that's been happening since 2014, you morons. It's like that scene in Zoolander where you probably don't know this, but the files are in the computer scene. You ever seen that? They send these two guys in to steal this computer because there's important files in it. But they send male models because that's the whole thing about this movie is like male model. Anyways, so the male model takes the computer, and it's like one of those iMacs, like the first iMacs, like you know what I'm talking about. And he grabs it into like in front of all these people because he wants to make the villain look bad. He like grabs the computer. And he's like, the files are in the computer. And he goes to like smash the computer on the ground, so all the files like would come spilling out of the computer, and everybody would see all these files. And he smashes it and looks, and everybody's like, what do you think, you idiot? He's like, where'd all the files go? Anyways, I feel like that guy when it comes to technology. The files are in the computer. That's probably what I sound like when I'm talking about 3D printing.
I mean, it's still relatively new, unless you actually are in that space.
No, not at all.
It's not going to be. I mean, 3D printing homes has probably been maybe the last 2 or 3 years. Like that's still fairly new,
nascent, right?
So,
isn't that the word?
Yeah,
nascent technology.
Yes.
We're smart.
See, yeah.
But so now the word people love us. The 3D printer people hate us, but the word people, yeah, they love it. Although maybe nascent is like a word you learn in grade 9, and I'm just sound really sophomoric right now.
I think that's a $10 word, man. I work with $2 words all the time. So
yeah. I'm more from like the penny word bin. That's where I'm finding my words. Yeah. Anyways, well, buddy, it's we should put a wrap on old Epi 24.
Thank you for helping me get through an hour where I didn't have to think about my fasting, which was really nice. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, for those who, maybe like, well, you guys didn't bring the energy, to this episode that you normally do. It's because look at Rupesh. He hasn't had food in 24 hours. He's a robot over there.
I was still pretty sharp, though.
No, it was good. It was good. You didn't like just stare into the camera and drool or something, which is probably what I would have done. But so you were still really, really good. I'm proud of you. This is. Sorry for people listening who made it all the way to the end. The first 20 minutes was me not understanding what a water fast was. So all right. So if we recap, water fast people hate us, think that we're so stupid. 3D printing people hate us, think we're so stupid. Word people probably don't like us because we think they like us, and they're using much bigger words than we're akin to. So probably just
who watches this? Who watches this?
Just made enemies this episode. It's like the thing where in 10 years we're billionaires because we have an episode that goes viral. We get Elon Musk on and he smokes a blunt like he did with Joe Rogan, and we get like billions of views, and people go back and watch the old stuff. Those people are the
mushrooms is a new thing. Mushrooms is a new thing. We got to get Elon Musk on our show and do mushrooms.
Do mushrooms with Michael Pollan. Have you ever watched Michael Pollan on Joe Rogan?
Yeah, I was actually he was just on, right? I think I'm listening to it right now.
Oh, so. Yeah. Well, and he's been on a couple times before. So like Michael Pollan, and we were trying to wrap up the episode, but Michael Pollan wrote all these great books like In Defense of Food, Omnivore's Dilemma, and all that stuff. Apparently he's now taken that same like journalistic approach to hallucinogenic drugs, and so he wrote a book called, I haven't read it, I don't know, Open Your Mind or something like that, or How to Open Your Mind, I can't remember. But so him and Joe Rogan were talking about this stuff, and he talks about mushrooms a little bit. Anyway, so we can do an episode of mushrooms. I don't really know anything about mushrooms, but I'd be happy to talk about it. So yeah,
it's like a huge emerging thing. Like people are there's companies out there now openly, selling this stuff because of the health benefits apparently. So it's like cannabis is like old, So,
old news, man.
Old
Just
news.
like us. Well, hey, buddy, Godspeed here in the next 12 hours or so. Hope it goes well. Hope that bone broth tastes good, and then that big old belly full of waffles whenever you get it. But yeah, appreciate you taking the time in the middle of this, and happy to be back and happy to catch up with you. And let's chat again here in an upcoming episode.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate
you.
See ya.